The influence of Batman the Animated Series was felt even before the show started. The producers of the series worked closely with the Batman crew at DC Comics, allowing them to see the scripts for the episodes as well as the character designs before anyone else. Thanks to that, DC brought back Harvey Bullock, a popular character in the Bronze Age of comics, but who was forgotten after Batman Year One. They were also quick to introduce Renee Montoya, a character who was created for the animated series but whose first appearance happened in the comics. DC soon realized the potential of the animated series and they started working on a comic book based on the show. Scott Peterson became the editor of this project, which was originally going to be a 3-issue miniseries written by Kelly Puckett and illustrated by Ty Templeton. The then president of DC Comics, Paul Levitz, decided that this was just too good to be only a miniseries, and that's how the Batman Adventures became an ongoing series that began in 1992 and ended in 1995, the same time as the original run of the animated series. The Batman Adventures opened with a 3-part storyline featuring the Penguin, Catwoman and the Joker, the 3 main villains from the Batman movies by Tim Burton. DC wanted to capitalize on the popularity of the Penguin and Catwoman after the success of Batman Returns that same year. Unfortunately, this makes the story feel a bit forced and not nearly as effective as the episodes of the series. And I think that's unfortunate, because that first storyline is not a good example of the kind of quality stories that were actually told in later issues. In this video, I want to give you an idea of the kind of stories you can expect from this series, and to do so, I'm going to highlight the 10 best stories from the Batman Adventures, starting with a story called Super Friends from issue number 25. This extra-long special anniversary issue features the always effective team-up of Batman and Superman against the threat of Max Zeus and Lex Luthor. The story was written by Kelly Puckett with art by Mike Parobeck, the 2 regular creators for the most part of the series and, as such, responsible for many of the stories in this video, such as Good Face Bad Face from issue number 22. This story has a phenomenal characterization of Two-Face, as well as Batman's struggle to fight the man who was once a very close friend. The story works perfectly well as a continuation of the origin story of Two-Face from the animated series, and provides a terrific explanation as to why Two-Face really needs the coin. It's an all-around good story, and it's not a coincidence that it was published on issue number 22. At number 8 is The Third Door, a great mystery story in the grand old tradition of the detective adventures of Batman's past. The story is greeting as a homage of many of the most iconic suspense movies by Alfred Hitchcock. There's even a small cameo by the notorious director in one panel, where he is being slapped in the face by Tippi Hedren, the star of 2 of his movies and a controversial figure in the history of the director. The plot is similar to many Hitchcock movies, as Bruce Wayne is wrongfully arrested for murder. By the time Dick Grayson investigates the crime scene, Bruce realizes that Dick is in grave danger, and he has no choice but to escape from prison. The story was illustrated by Brad Rader, one of the storyboard artists for the animated series, and his work adds an extraordinary feeling of watching a film noir movie featuring Batman as a dark avenger of the night. The movie references don't end there though, as the number 7 story on this list is called The Last Tango in Paris, which is the name of a popular 1970s movie. In the story, Batman and Talia work together to find a valuable treasure, and they travel all the way to France, spending a whole day together in Paris. During the daylight, they spend time as regular tourists, traveling around the city and enjoying each other's company. It genuinely feels as if they are having a normal life, as a loving couple of 2 very good-looking people, which makes it even harder when, at the end, they are separated. It's a very poignant moment when Batman realizes that Talia's love for him is true, but that his conviction to fight evil will never let him love her as much as she does. A story that will make you feel the loneliness of Batman. On a lighter note, at number 6 we have the story called Batgirl, Day 1, and it's from issue number 12, which is best known for being the first comic book appearance of Harley Quinn. This story is also the first time that this Barbara becomes Batgirl, as the comic book was published months before her first appearance in the animated series. That's why this story contradicts her origin in the Shadow of the Bat episodes, showing a different version of Barbara's first mission as Batgirl. And all things considered, this is definitely a more exciting story, as Barbara manages to stop the combined forces of Poison Ivy, Harley Quinn, and Catwoman. It was also groundbreaking, as it was the first time in 4 years that Batgirl was seen in a comic book, and it was definitely nice to have her back. Speaking of that, the next story is called The Killing Book, from issue number 16. This story takes the number 5 spot for being the most metafictional story of the whole series. In the story, Joker finds out that there's a comic book company called CD Comics that publish a book called Gotham Adventures, where Batman always defeats him. What follows is pure comic book chaos, as Joker kidnaps the artist of the comic book and makes him illustrate his own version of the series, where he always wins. This is the kind of fun that only comic books can provide, and the multiple self-references from the creative team inside the story are priceless. Also, Mike Parobeck illustrates one of the best-looking Jokers. Speaking of the Joker, there can't be a list of the best Batman adventure comics without Mad Love, the first origin story of Harley Quinn and the number 4 story on this list. This was a graphic novel published as a special edition of the Batman Adventures. It was written by Paul Dini with art by Bruce Timm, the creators of Harley Quinn and 2 of the most important creative minds in Batman the Animated Series. Mad Love is still one of the best Batman stories of all time, showcasing the origin story of one of the most popular characters of the 21st century. The story was so iconic and well received that it was eventually adapted into an episode of the new Batman Adventures, the continuation of the animated series. Mad Love is, in my opinion, the best Harley Quinn story ever made, and it's something you should definitely read. Just like the Batman Adventures Holiday Special, which everybody already knows because almost all the stories in this extra long special were adapted in the episode Holiday Nights from the Batman Adventures. The stories with Clayface, Harley Quinn, Poison Ivy, and the Joker were all adapted in the episode, as well as the ever-popular ending with Commissioner Gordon and Batman having coffee in New Year's Eve. There was only one story that didn't make it to the episode, and that's the reason why this book takes the number 3 spot on this list. White Christmas is a story about Mr. Freeze and his escape from Arkham, precisely on Christmas Eve. The story was written by Paul Dini, who also wrote the episode Heart of Ice, and the art was done by Glenn Murakami, a character designer and illustrator for the animated series. That's why the story works well as a sequel to Heart of Ice, and it shows the more noble and painful side of Mr. Freeze, if that's even possible. His reason to break out of Arkham and the fight with Batman at the cemetery share poignant themes that show us the tragic reality of 2 men who can't let go of the memory and the loss of the people they loved. The number 2 story is called Riot Act, a 2-part story from issues number 4 and 5. After the disappointment of the initial storyline, writer Martin Pasco and artist Brad Rader delivered one of the best Scarecrow stories of all time. The characterization of Dr. Jonathan Crane was not properly explored in the animated series, but thankfully, this story shows us the great potential of the character. Pasco was a writer for the animated series, and Rader, as I've said before, was a storyboard artist, so naturally Riot Act is the closest that the comics get to the animated series. Brad Rader illustrates the story with striking visuals and interesting points of view, which complements the idea of watching an episode of the show. Martin Pasco, on the other hand, delivers a thrilling adventure that adds a real emotional depth to the character of a Scarecrow, which allows us to understand the character better than ever before. And the best story from the Batman Adventures is definitely Just Another Night, from issue number 33. In the story, Bruce has found a nice woman and he goes out on a date with her and her small son. They watch The Grey Ghost on the movie theater, but when they go outside, they are attacked by a mugger who steals their money at gunpoint. The incident causes Bruce to leave the woman and the child and go after the criminal as Batman to punish him and make him pay for his crime. The past trauma of Batman comes back to haunt him and once again prevents him from moving on with his life. In the aftermath, the lady is no longer interested in Bruce because he left her and her son after such a terrible incident. Bruce tries to tell himself that everything is fine because the criminal was captured, the stolen things were returned, and nobody was hurt. As he tells that to himself, he fails to see the irony in his own words. Just Another Night was written by Ty Templeton and the art was done by Dev Madan, two creators who did only a few stories in the series, but like this one, were all quite effective. These are only my personal choices for the best Batman stories of the Batman Adventures, which doesn't mean that the rest of the series is not good. On the contrary, the Batman Adventures was something unique and special. At the time it was published, the Batman comics had become somewhat dark, gritty, and serious. Nightfall was the story being published in the main Batman comics, and it was an extremely long crossover about the fall of Batman and his replacement with a deranged lunatic that kills people. That's why the Batman Adventures was so special. It was a series for everybody and could be read at any given point. The letters sent to these comics were from people of all ages, from small children between ages 5 and 10 to professionals like doctors and teachers. The stories were light-hearted in nature, easygoing narratives about Batman saving the day with gorgeous illustrations based on the most iconic version of Batman on the screen. The comics radiated fun as the creators themselves had fun in the series. Kelly Puckett created this trio of harmless villains: Mastermind, Mr. Nice, and the Professor. All of them caricatures and fun parodies of the big editors at DC Comics. The Batman Adventures showed an entire young generation that the Batman comics could be fun for everybody, just like in the old days of the golden and silver ages of comics. For only a couple of dollars you would get a whole story told in one single issue from beginning to end, and most importantly, you could enjoy that story regardless of your age. The Batman Adventures is the best example of how the Batman comics could be fun for everybody, without losing the edge of the character or his dark appeal. It is the kind of comic that is so much needed these days, and one that no longer exists. The Batman Adventures is a treasure, one that introduced millions of kids and adults to the world of Batman, and one of the best comic book series about the Dark Knight. I loved reading the Batman Adventures. I had never read that series before, so it was a real treat to dig into those comics. And after months of working on Batman the Animated Series, I think it's time to go back to the comics. So expect more videos like these in the future. As always, a special thanks to my patrons for the support and a big shout out to all of you who stick around until the end. You're the real MVPs. And also remember you can follow me on Twitter at Salazar Knight. Friends, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.